Hello, everyone, and welcome. On this episode, we have a very special guest. Is Dr. David Katz. He's a board-certified specialist in preventive medicine and public health, and is also a recipient of many awards for his contributions to public health. Dr. Katz served as the founding director of Yale Griffin Prevention Research Center between 1998 and 2019. Is the founder and president of the True Health Initiative. He's also the founder and CEO of Diet ID, Inc. Dr. Hers is a bachelor's degree from Dartmouth College, his medical degree from Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and an MPH from Yale School of Public Health. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Julia. Pleasure to be with you.
Yes, I like getting started by giving our audience an opportunity to get to know you, your background, and some of the factors that have shaped your career trajectory, and specifically what led you to focus on the area of medicine that you focused on. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
No, not at all. Delighted.
Okay.
It's probably a biphasic story. So there's the early part of the story that got me involved with nutrition and lifestyle, and that was very personal.
Mm.
I wasn't much of an athlete as a young kid, and I kind of got picked on, and then I suddenly acquired an interest in sports and athletics at about age 13. So I was a little late to the party, but then I jumped in with both feet, was very enthusiastic. And I tried out, I think, for the wrestling team at that point in junior high school or whatever it was. And I didn't wind up sticking with wrestling, but it stuck with me when the coach told us how many sit-ups we should be able to do, and I couldn't do that many, and how many push-ups we should be able to do, and I couldn't do that many. So I thought, okay, well, I've got work to do. And I started working out. And more or less, with some rare exceptions, I've worked out every day of my life since, and I went well past the targets for sit-ups and push-ups, and so I was really focused on the fitness side. And then just a little later in my life, I think I was about 17. I kind of had an epiphany and thought, well, any machine is very dependent on the quality of fuel. I can't imagine my body is any different. And my dad is a cardiologist, was a cardiologist working at that time. And so, I had some exposure to medical thinking. And I thought, well, if I want a high performance body, I've got to put in high performance fuel. And so I started being very focused on food and nutrition. And then I went to college and medical school and residency. And then the second part of the story. So I already had this longstanding interest in lifestyle for my own sake, really. And when I was a resident in internal medicine, spending 100 plus hours a week in the hospital, at some point it occurred to me that I was being trained to be one of the king's horses and one of the king's men. And I suspect everybody knows the Humpty Dumpty nursery rhyme. All the king's horses, all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty together again. And for me, what that was all about was I certainly fully appreciated the privilege of being trained in medicine, the privilege of having the skill set to show up at the bedside of somebody in their moment of greatest need, and to be able to help them ideally, and comfort them in the worst case scenario. I thought that was a great honor and a great privilege, and I revere it to this day. But in terms of the big picture, hospitals were filled then as now with people who had things they never needed to get. Essentially, we just kept letting Humpty Dumpty fall off the wall and then sending in ambulances to scoop them up and try to patch them up. And of course, we can't unscramble an egg and we can't uncrack an eggshell. So heart attacks, stroke, lung disease from smoking, diabetes, complications of obesity and cardiometabolic disease, many cancers, um, many cases of dementia related to cardiovascular disease. And back in those days, we also saw hospital beds filled with AIDS related to both drug use and sexual activity. And in both cases, we knew how to prevent the transmission. So there was this enormous opportunity to prevent disease propagation, but we weren't doing it. Again, essentially just letting Humpty Dumpty fall off the wall again and again and again and again and again, and sending in the king's horses and the king's men to do the best we could to patch them up. And I thought, well, we can do much better than this if we could somehow go back in time and adjust people's lifestyle so they didn't smoke and they ate better and they were more active. So much of this never needs to happen in the first place. So I then started shopping around for how to become an expert in that. And I found my way to preventive medicine residency. So I did a second residency, which is what landed me at Yale, in preventive medicine, public health, and the rest, as they say, is history. So, once I studied preventive medicine, it was clear that the overwhelming opportunity was in the lifestyle domain, that it really was what we do with our feet, our forks, and our fingers, essentially physical activity, dietary pattern, and not bringing cigarettes to our mouth. That makes the biggest difference. And I guess the final part of this story, Julia, in terms of how I wound up where I wound up. So it was personal interest as a kid, and then the big picture as a medical resident. When I graduated my preventive medicine residency at Yale in 1993, I had just recently finished my training, and a paper came out in the Journal of the American Medical Association, which actually further altered the trajectory of my career. I think it's one of the most important papers in the modern biomedical literature. It was entitled Actual Causes of Death in the United States. Pretty provocative title, right? You would think, well, we know what people die of. It gets written on death certificates. But these two authors, Bill Foege, Mike McGinnis, said, no. What gets written on death certificates are not really the causes of death. They're effects of the causes of death. So someone dies of heart failure due to heart attack, due to atherosclerosis. All of that may show up on the death certificate, but it leaves you wanting to know what caused the atherosclerosis. What was the root cause? What set all that badness in motion? So they did an analysis of all the leading causes of death in the United States and identified the underlying causes of them. And that was a list of 10 factors made famous in their paper. And what captured my imagination then is, as I just indicated, the top three were how we use our feet, our forks, and our fingers. So tobacco was the number one cause of premature death in 1990, followed by poor diet, followed by physical activity. And really the only thing that's changed since then is that tobacco's come down the list a little bit, thank goodness, because we smoke less. But diet and physical activity have moved up to the top. So actually they're the leading killers, if you will. The lack of physical activity, poor quality diet, and poor quality diet is number one now. So I really wanted to be where the action was, and that's where the action is. We have the greatest potential to add years to lives and add life to years by focusing on diet and lifestyle. So I've devoted my career to that.
Thank you. That's quite remarkable. And your concluding points actually leads to my second question. What I have here is actually poor diet has been identified as a predictor for the risk of premature death from all causes. And when you think about diet and diet quality, there are important things people should have at the forefront of their minds. So if you would talk a little bit and share some insights on this, what would you advise people? How would you advise people when they think about what they put on their plates and what they give their families every day? What should be prioritized and how should they think about this?
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to reiterate, so diet quality measured objectively is the single leading predictor for premature death in the United States today. And this is true in dozens of other countries around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And this is courtesy of the Global Burden of Disease Study. And for
Mm-hmm.
those who want a quick reference, there was an op-ed in the New York Times, August 26th, 2019. So it's just before the pandemic found us, by Dariush Mozaffarian, then Dean of Nutrition at Tufts, and Dan Glickman, former Secretary of Agriculture for the United States. And the op-ed in the New York Times, which you can just Google, was entitled, "Our Food is Killing Too Many of Us." So they cite the Global Burden of Disease Study and lay out the case that poor quality diet is killing over 500,000 Americans prematurely every year, year in and year out. So this really is the pandemic that manages to hide in plain sight because it's so familiar. It seems to invite, if not our contempt, at least our complacency, and we just let it go on and on and on and on. So the remedy is incredibly simple. And I think one of the mistakes we make is complicating it. And for many years, we complicated it by focusing on various nutrients. We focused on fat level and carbohydrate level. We focus on isolated components of diet. It's all about gluten. It's all about lectins. It's all about the glycemic load. We pick this, we pick that. We focus first on sugar, then on sodium, and then we argue with one another about all of that. But I frankly, and I say this as somebody who has devoted 35 years or so to this space, who's published a couple hundred papers, who's written 4 editions of a nutrition textbook for health professionals, nutrition and clinical practice, a bunch of other books, review articles on the best diet. I would say nobody's really done a better job of encapsulating what constitutes the fundamentals of eating well than Michael Pollan, who got it down to 7 words. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Now we can unpack that a little bit because it's a little short on detail, we might agree. It's fundamentally correct, but by eat food, he means real food. And that's particularly salient these days as Carlos Montero and others talk a lot about ultra-processed food and the importance of ultra-processing. And we can talk more about that if you like, Julia, but ultra-processing is bad. And it's bad not just because the more you process food, the less it's like natural food, which is what we're supposed to be eating, but it's bad on purpose because the processing is in the service of making food addictive, essentially, making us eat more than we should and eat the wrong things. It's by design. And if you want more information about that, you can read Michael Moss. Michael Moss is a Pulitzer Prize winning investigative journalist, author of a couple of great books, Salt, Sugar, Fat, and Hooked, all about the food industry's machinations. And his first book, Salt, Sugar, Fat, was excerpted for a New York Times Magazine cover story entitled The Extraordinary Science of Addictive Junk Food. So all about how food is willfully processed to be addictive, to overstimulate the human appetite center, to make us eat way too much of all the wrong things. So moving in the direction of real food, as Michael Pollan advises, and all the rest of us advise as well, eliminates all of that. So you're eating food direct from nature. The more things you eat with an ingredient list that's just 1 word long, the better, because those foods like a banana or broccoli or almonds or walnuts or avocado, there's no manipulation at all. They come to us direct from nature. Not too much. So again, the 3 parts of Michael Pollan's pithy wisdom: eat food, not too much, mostly plants. So eat food means real food and get away from all the ultra processed junk masquerading as food. To be honest, the beauty of eating real food is that the not too much takes care of itself. The problem with epidemic obesity is we're eating highly processed food made to be hyper palatable, made to maximize the amount of eating we do. I bet everybody remembers the Lay's potato chip ads, bet you can't eat just one. So all our food is kind of like that. Bet you can't eat just one, bet you can't stop, because we designed the food to make sure you couldn't stop. But when you eat real food, you fill up on a much more reasonable number of calories. So the not too much is baked in. And one of the many virtues of wholesome foods is they fill you up on fewer calories. And then mostly plants would be vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds. And by the way, mostly drink water when thirsty. And the last thing I'll say about this, Julie, so it's really very simple. And by the way, it translates beautifully to a wide array of diets. It could be vegan, but it doesn't have to be. It could be vegetarian. It could be flexitarian. It could be pescatarian. It could be Mediterranean. And I think importantly, it translates to a wide variety of cultural diets. It could be Latin, it could be Asian, it could be South Asian, it could be South American, it could be from any culture and adapted to that culture. So, there are lots of different fruits and vegetables and grains and nuts and seeds and legumes, and you pick the ones that work for you so you can love the food that loves you back. And I think that's really important. The last thing I'll say about the importance of getting food right, because it absolutely is the single most important thing we can do to protect both our vitality and our longevity, to add years to our lives and life to our years, and to do that for all the people we love. There's no other medicine you're going to share with your kids, but you can share high quality eating with your kids. Lifestyle is the medicine designed to pay forward. I think that's a beautiful thing. I say that as past president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. It really is the best medicine. It's the one kind of medicine we can share. But the final thing I'll say about getting food right is it's about more than just us. We have to look beyond the bounds of our own skin. We could be selfish and say, I just want to eat for my own vitality. But I look at it through 3 lenses. And frankly, I think they're all important. And I'm not sure that my own health is the most important anymore. One is, what are the direct human health effects? And I'm a physician, so that's been my job. Two is, what are the implications for how we treat our fellow creatures? I think that's really important. Behind me on the chair is my best friend, Barley. She's got four legs. I've got two other dogs. I've got a couple of horses. They're members of my family. I love them. Well, animals just like that are tortured on factory farms, not just killed to be eaten, but tortured before they're killed. And I don't think any decent person should want all that cruelty on the menu. So I think that matters. And then finally, the environmental impact of our food choices, which is massive. And in this time of climate change and environmental degradation and declining planetary health, frankly, that's probably the single greatest concern we all share. It's much bigger than the bounds of our own skin. We're all in this together. We only have one planet to call home. We're not going to have another one. We've got to take care of this, and how we eat has something really important to contribute to that. When you look through those three lenses, what does the food do to my health? What does it say about how we treat our fellow creatures, and what is it doing to planetary health? It's a really strong argument to eat real food, mostly plants. And thankfully, the right formula is the answer across all three of those considerations.
That's a very robust and rich answer. Thanks so much for sharing that. And one of the things that I really love with your conclusion is how it touched on very important aspects of this, not just food for our health alone, but also thinking outside of ourselves and thinking, how does my choices impact the environment around me? Can we support our populations in years to come if we continue doing what we're doing right now? So sustainability and a focus on food and health are two angles that are very important. And also, of course, fairly treating other animals is also crucial as well. But moving quite just a little bit away from that to talk more in terms of overall nutritional quality. A few years ago, you published a paper and you talked about overall nutritional quality index, a nutritional guidance system. And do you mind, number one, sharing a little bit about that before we dive into the next aspect of this? What exactly do you hope to achieve when you worked on that project and developed that system?
Yeah, sure, Julia. Happy to talk about it. So I'm a pragmatist. In many of the things I've done over the years, I said, let's not make perfect the enemy of good. Let's identify the best we can do and do that. So it was long obvious to me that the average person couldn't make much sense out of what was on a nutrition label because there's basically a lot of advertisement and marketing on the front of the package. I mean, take kids' breakfast cereals, for example. They're horrible. In many instances, the first ingredient is sugars. This is kind of like candy kids are invited to pour milk over and call breakfast. But the front of the package doesn't say this is candy that you put in a bowl. Don't let your child eat it. Step away from the box and nobody will get hurt. I mean, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say this will likely cause obesity, diabetes, and tooth decay. It doesn't say any of that. What it says is fortified with 11 essential vitamins and minerals, part of a complete breakfast. And, that's what the box says. And when you see commercials on TV, that's what they say. And so, parents are bamboozled into buying junk to feed their kids. And I am privileged to call many of the world's leading nutrition experts friends and colleagues. And I know that they're not subject to that manipulation. They have too much knowledge. And that doesn't make us special. It's what we're supposed to know. I don't know that pilots are more special than the rest of us, but they do know how to fly planes, right? Everybody knows what they've been trained to know. So in our case, we've been trained to know nutrition. You can't fool us by saying fortified with 11 essential vitamins and minerals. We say, yeah, it's basically vitamin and mineral fortified junk. So I'll skip the junk. And if I want to take a multivitamin, I'll take a multivitamin. Thank you very much. So, aware of the fact that nutrition experts can see through all of that and could use ingredient lists and nutrition facts panels to make sense of what's available in the supermarket and to do a much, much better job than the average person, I thought, well, why don't we create something like GPS, right? I mean, GPS says you don't have to be a professional navigator. to get where you want to go, we'll make it easy. Everybody should be able to get where they want to go. And so technology did that. So why don't we do the same thing for food? Whatever it is that all of us know, us being leading nutrition experts, let's put it together and turn it into an algorithm. Essentially, let's turn our decision making into something everybody can use, which is really what GPS does, right? I mean, they're expert navigators who know how to use the stars and geometry and trigonometry to figure out how to get where they want to go. And that was all converted into a system that enabled all of us to get where we want to go. We did that for nutrition, and that's what the Anki was all about. So working with an elite team of roughly a dozen scientists from the US and Canada, leading nutrition experts from major universities, we spent 2 years designing the overall nutritional quality index algorithm. That's what the Anki was. And essentially we spent weeks and months reviewing the literature, deciding what are all of the key nutrients that determine the overall nutritional quality of food. And, there are lots of important nutrients, but what are the ones that really make a difference in the United States today? Right? I mean, we're for the most part fine with iodine. It's in our salt, so we're not worried about too much and we're not worried about too little. So we would agree, although it's a very important nutrient, it's essential, iodine is not one of the nutrients that is having a huge impact on public health in the United States right now. In a different part of the world, maybe yes, but not here. So if we're going to do this to help people in the United States shop better, what are the key nutrients? By the time we were done, and the project took about 2 years, we had 30 different nutrient entries, and they were vitamins, minerals, fiber, calories, total fat, carbohydrate, protein, the quality of fat, carbohydrate, protein, saturated fat, unsaturated fat, omega-3, soluble fiber, insoluble fiber. And the emphasis was on all the nutrients that were most important to health. So back then we had to worry about trans fat. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about that so much anymore. But trans fat, saturated fat, healthy fats, omega-3 in particular, sodium, added sugar, total sugar, the different kinds of fiber, all those things got weighted. And we went beyond just putting these nutrients in the algorithm. We also said, how important are they and why are they important? And we thought about three things. First of all, how strong is their association with a particular health outcome? So for example, if we're looking at fiber and diabetes, how protective is fiber? Or looking at added sugar and diabetes, how harmful is added sugar? So we looked at the strength of the association, we looked at the importance of the public health effect, and we looked at the prevalence of it. So how severe is the condition and how common is it? And we weighted all the nutrients based on those. So for example, trans fat, which is really, really bad for the heart and is associated with a condition that can kill people and a condition that's extremely common, got the highest weighting coefficients for strength of association with heart disease, for the severity of heart disease, potentially lethal, and for the prevalence of heart disease because it's the leading cause of premature death in the United States. And so we did that for all the different nutrients. We put the good stuff over the bad stuff to create a ratio, translated that into a numerical scale. And by the time we were all done, we had a 100-point scale, 1 to 100. The higher the number, the better the food. And it looked at all the different nutrients. And the idea was to put that one number where everybody could see it right in front of the package. We were hoping to put it right on the food package. What we wound up doing was entering into licensing agreements with supermarkets, and they put it on the shelf. So right next to the price for the item was what was called the NuVal score. So the Anki was turned into a commercial program called NuVal. 1 to 100, the higher the number, the more nutritious the food. Now, sadly, we'll end the story before we spend too much time on it because it's no longer available, this system, because it did too good a job. And the food industry killed it. And there are stories I could tell you that would curl your hair about what actually went on behind the scenes with the major food companies trying to kill this program because it told the truth about their products. And a lot of what they were selling got scores of 1. The worst possible score because it was junk. So much of the food supply is junk. So sadly, the Anki as a public health service ultimately was killed, and now its only contribution is in the scientific literature, helping others design the best possible nutrient profiling systems. But before it was killed, we deployed into a total of up to about 2,000 supermarkets throughout the United States, and we're reaching 40 million people a week. And I traveled the country at that time, meeting with executives at the various supermarket chains to talk about what we were doing together. And I met with their customers. I met with shoppers, and the stories were incredible. I in particular, this one is a standout. I met a gentleman in Tennessee who shook my hand and thanked me and said, I've lost 180 pounds. He obviously had been severely obese, but he was lean when I saw him. And he said, I've been using Nuval, the Anki, when I shop. I forget which supermarket he was shopping in, Tops or something. Um, I've been using this for the past 2 years. And basically, I've traded up all my groceries. So everything I used to buy, I now look at the scores and I buy a better version. And just by doing that, I've improved my diet so much and I've reduced the number of calories it takes to feel full by so much that over the past 2 years, I've lost 180 pounds. And I haven't done anything other than trade up my groceries. And I thought, wow, fantastic. Now, I heard many stories like his from all around the country, but his was the most dramatic. I heard 80 pounds, I heard 40 pounds, I heard, lots of, I stopped taking medication for my blood pressure, I stopped taking medication for my cholesterol, all that good stuff. But 180 pounds was the standout story. And that's how powerful trading up groceries can be. So I was very sad that after a decade, the food industry succeeded in killing Nuval and the Yankee. But again, I think we made a permanent contribution by raising the standard for these kinds of programs that put on easy display. They're called front of pack labeling systems that put on easy display that anybody can interpret at a glance. Which is the most nutritious product in this aisle? Which is the best bread, the best pasta sauce, the best salad dressing, the best dairy products, the best breakfast cereal, and on and on. And the power of simply trading up our choices really is quite incredible for reducing the bad stuff, excess saturated fat, excess sodium, excess added sugar, increasing the good stuff, more fiber, more healthy fats, more minerals, more vitamins, more antioxidants, and for reducing the total number of calories it takes to feel full and satisfied. So I definitely am glad I did that. I'm sorry it couldn't withstand the assault of the food industry ultimately. But again, I think by means of influencing the science of nutrient profiling, we continue to exert a positive influence.
Yeah, that's it's an impressive outcome that people are having. I mean, I still remember reading the conclusion of that paper where you said that combined with consumer education program, the ONQI has considerable potential to improve dietary patterns and consequently public health outcomes. So to see the results that people are having and sharing with you, obviously that conclusion that I just read in code was actually accurate. So one of the things I'm thinking about is someone might be listening today and think, oh yeah, we have and have this can be integrated into to still help people learn more about what they're eating and know and make choices, intelligent choices, and maybe reach out to you. So we'll talk more about how people can connect with you later on towards the end of the program. So I'll move right along because I think you said some very, very important things, especially when you started talking about the overall nutritional quality index program and the outcome people are experiencing. It goes a long way to show the importance of consumer education when it comes to food and health, and also empowering them to be able to gather information to make those informed choices as well. Because a lot of people, they have an idea about food and the way food impacts their health, but they don't really know how to take steps, how to take the right steps to take, or some of them will tell you there's a lot of ambiguity when it comes to nutritional guidelines. I don't know which one is good for me, which one is not good, or maybe yesterday was published that we should eat less of this, and today that is not accurate anymore. So there's like those ambiguity when it comes to nutritional guidelines, and I really believe that education plays a huge role in helping people make informed choices. And I think it's a growth area when I think about our community. And what would you recommend in terms of addressing these gaps when it comes to food and health education? What would you recommend as an approach or a strategy to helping people be more informed about the choices in eating
It,
healthy?
it's a great question, Julia. And to be clear, I've written a lot of books on this
Mm,
topic. One of the books I wrote was called The Truth About Food. It's a really big book. It's a 200,000 word book, 800 pages. And I joke in the book that this book should be 7 words long, not 200,000 words long. And the 7 words wouldn't be mine. They'd all be plagiarized. They'd be Michael Pollan's words that we talked about before. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. We're done. It's just that simple. So the other 199,993 words were all about why does it seem so complicated when it's so simple? So it really is simple. But there are a lot of people making money out of pseudo complications about diet. If we can be confused, we can be talked into silliness. If we can be confused, we can be talked into fad diets. If we can be talked into fad diets can result in bestsellers. So book publishers make a lot of money and authors make a lot of money. And if we can be fooled and confused about diet, then diet can be a constant fixture on morning TV shows and on news programs. And so they make a lot of money. The shows make money and the advertisers make money. And so whole industries are making money out of pseudo confusion about diet. And of course, it's even worse than that because pseudo confusion about diet means we never get it right, which means we all just keep getting fat and sick again and again and again. So big food makes money selling us stuff we really shouldn't be eating in the first place. And big pharma makes money treating diseases we never needed to get and around and around. So it's really simple. And my most recent book, co-authored with Mark Bittman, famous chef, cook, author of How to Cook Everything, which is in most people's kitchens. We did the same thing. We said, we'll write a whole book about how to eat, which is what the book is called, but it's incredibly simple. And that's what people need to keep in mind. If you mostly eat real food, and it's mostly plants, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds, and if you mostly drink water when you're thirsty, if you just get that right, if you really mostly do that, you'll be fine. The nutrients will sort, you won't eat too much added sugar because those foods don't contain too much added sugar. You won't eat too little fiber because those foods contain a lot of fiber, and on it goes. Just everything that we focus on and fixate on in our culture sorts itself out if you get the foods right. And as I mentioned earlier, Julie, I think this is really important. It's a theme of healthy eating, but it's not one prescriptive diet. And, I mean, if you're from a particular culture, you grew up somewhere, the kinds of foods you grew up with are important to you. And they're important because they're familiar. They're important because they're part of your memories. They're important because they're part of your culture. We have to respect that. And so there isn't just one way to eat right. There are heritage-based ways of eating right, culture-based ways of eating right, variations on a theme. So this is what people need to know about. How can I eat well in a way that really works for me and my family, that is appetizing, that's appealing? Because I want to enjoy food. Yeah, I want to enjoy good health, but I also want to enjoy good food, and people should be able to do both. And so, at this stage of my career, after 30 years or so in academic medicine, I'm now an entrepreneur working on the exact thing you are talking about, empowering people to know, how are you eating now and how does it compare to how you ought to be eating? And I don't mean ought to because I say how you ought to eat. I mean how you ought to be eating so that A, you can enjoy the food, B, you can enjoy good health, and C, ideally it's good for the planet and all the rest of that stuff too. And you can share this with the people you love. One of the things we overlook in our culture, Julie, I think, is that healthy people have more fun. I think when we talk about health, it's often at the end of a wagging finger, an admonishing finger, right? It's a moral imperative. You should be healthy because somebody is telling you that's what good people do. No, no, that's wrong. Health is not a moral imperative. Health is an opportunity. Healthy people have more fun. And so, nobody wants to trade their health for good food, but nobody wants to trade their good food for health either. We should be able to love food that loves us back. So what we do in my current work at Diet ID is we use an objective measure of overall diet quality. So everything you were saying is true, right? People hear different theories and different studies, and we just bypass all that. We're not about opinion. We are using the single best objective measure of overall diet quality that takes everything into consideration. And how do we know this measure works? In large studies involving hundreds of thousands of people, the measure of objective diet quality, called the Healthy Eating Index, correlates with all-cause mortality. In other words, better scores, you're less likely to die. Worse scores, you're more likely to die. That's pretty convincing, right? And there are big differences. So this thing really works. This is not somebody's opinion. This is not some cockamamie theory. This is not tune in tomorrow to the morning shows to find out what's the latest, greatest diet this week. No, this is what has stood the test of time. What are the fundamentals of eating well that apply to all diets everywhere across cultures? So we use that, and we help people identify an optimal diet for them that really works for them. So I think essentially that's the value proposition of healthy eating, the opportunity to love food that loves you back. And yeah, there's some work to be done because most of us in modern culture eat so badly, and that's not our fault. It's because there's so much aggressive marketing to us and our kids of junk where food ought to be. So we have to get over that. And to get over that, it's a process. It's a little bit of work. I call the process taste bud rehab. Essentially, we have to familiarize our taste buds with real food so they learn to love it. They've been corrupted by soaking in junk where food ought to be all these years. So yeah, there's a little bit of effort involved, but you know what? Every worthwhile thing in our lives involved a little bit of effort. Learning the alphabet, back in first grade or kindergarten or whenever that was. I mean, it was painful then, but worth it because it was very advantageous to be literate for the rest of our lives. And learning to count and math, painful back then, but useful for balancing our checkbooks. Learning to ride a bicycle, we skinned our knees, but nice skill to have for the rest of our lives. Learning to drive a car, all this stuff. I think we tend to forget somehow when it comes to health, every worthwhile thing in our lives, everything we're able to do that's really valuable, that we rely on all the time, and that is the gift that keeps on giving, like reading and riding a bike and driving a car. We mastered those skills and we put them to good use for years and years and years and years. Well, health is like that. It deserves to be on that list where we're willing to put in a little time, a little effort, acquire some skills, get it right, and then benefit from it for the rest of our lives. And so that's the kind of work we do at Diet ID. We help people know what they're eating now. We help compare that to where they want to be, and then we help them get there from here.
That's really interesting. And with that dynamics, do you collect information from them as well? In terms of health outcomes and diet, there's that element of genetic variation as well. Some people are predisposed to some things. They respond differently than others. Do you factor that in when you collect it, or do you collect information from them to understand them better? How does that work in terms of full health outcomes?
That's a great question. So to be clear, Diet ID, which is again what my career is currently focused on, at its origins, it's the first fundamentally new way to do a comprehensive dietary assessment introduced in about 50 years. So it's a patented innovation. In about 60 seconds, we can do a comprehensive assessment of your dietary intake pattern. It's fun, it's easy, you can do it on a smartphone. You don't have to remember how many French fries you ate in the past 6 months and how much ketchup you put over. You have to remember anything. It's all based on pattern recognition. We show you images and you kind of play a game. Which looks more like what you eat, A or B, A or B, A or B, A or B. We play that game for about 60 seconds and we've got you. And then once we had that innovation developed, which was a lot of work, it was 4 years of work building a diet map and making this possible. But once we had that, then we were also able to develop a comprehensive set of solutions. So we know what your diet is now. What do you want diet to do for you? Do you want to lose weight? Do you want to lower your blood pressure? Do you want to improve your cholesterol? Are you worried about heart disease? Are you worried about brain function and cognition? Are you worried about symptoms of menopause? Are you worried about athletic performance? Are you worried about inflammation? Do you want to enhance your immune system? All of the above. Tick all those that apply. So we ask all that information. What is it you want diet to do? Our system then uses algorithms based on the weight of published evidence in the peer-reviewed literature to filter all the available diets through your choices. So we basically look, what does the science say about the diets that are best for X and best for Y and best for Z, because you ticked X, Y, and Z, and which of the diets are good for all three of those? Well, here are some choices that would be really, really good for you. Now, you asked about genetics. And yes, we can do that. And we have partners who do genomic testing, that sort of thing. But to be quite honest, Julia, there's not a lot of really valuable information there just yet. So genomic testing is good for certain things. And there are a couple of nutrition considerations, a couple of enzyme levels and gene activity levels that are directly relevant to nutrition, such as whether you need a particular variety of folate, methylated version of folate to absorb it well, those kinds of things. But most of the studies that have looked specifically at if we do a genomic assessment of you and use that to predict what kind of diet you should get, does it actually make a difference? And most of that literature so far has answered no. And probably the definitive recent study on this topic has been run by Christopher Gardner out of Stanford University. It's called Diet Fits. Diet Fits, basically looking at variations in genes, looking at variations in insulin sensitivity, randomly assigning people to different kinds of diets like low fat versus low carb, and predicting that if your genes say you're going to do better with low carb, then the people with those genes assigned to low carb would do better than the people who don't have those genes who get assigned to low carb, and all of those kinds of things. Well, that's been done and it didn't work out. In other words, everybody did the same regardless of their genes. And I don't think anybody should be too shocked about that, because the simple fact is we are the same kind of animal. We're all one extended human family. Think about any species other than our own, right? Think about all the dolphins in the world. Now, they're all different individuals. I'm sure they have genetic variation just like we do, but they all eat fish because they're all dolphins. And think of, all the world's horses. Lots and lots of horses in the world, and lots of different breeds of horses, and lots of genetic variation, but they all eat oats and grass and hay because they're all horses. So I think we kind of get ahead of ourselves and think, well, no, no, no. Homo sapiens are so special that we don't even know what to feed ourselves unless we do an individual genomic test. It's just not true. We're a certain kind of animal. We have fundamental dietary requirements. We have them in common. We're all more alike than different. But yes, as we learn more and more about specific genetic information and how to use it, can we tweak the dietary prescription so that, okay, you've got certain genes, so here's the kind of diet you have. Here's the basic kind of diet that would be better. Here's your cultural upbringing. And so, here's the kind of diet that's appealing to you. And oh, by the way, you have certain genes that say you probably ought to shift it a little bit in this direction versus that direction. I think that's ideal. So at Diet ID, we are certainly capable of drawing in the best available genetic information as it matures. But frankly, right now, most of what we need to know about diet doesn't come from genetic information. It comes from you. Namely, what do you want diet to do for you? And what kind of food are you actually willing to eat? If you answer those two questions, that's 99% of the story right there. And so that's what we rely on.
Yeah, that's great. And recently, your company merged with Tangelo. Congratulations, and it's expanding
Thank you.
the scope of your reach. I know they're also a big advocate of food as medicine, and more importantly, they're also looking to tackle food security as well. So helping people get the food to their doors as well. So it'll be good to learn more about the future you envision, what you hope to see in the next few years, and how you hope to help more people eat healthier and nourishing meals.
Yes, well, as you say, Julia, so we were acquired by Tangelo in this past year, and they're a major player in the food as medicine space. And what we particularly love about Tangelo is that they're focused on underserved populations. So, when you're doing something in the private sector, the business of business is business, and unfortunately, all too often, the focus really is about making money. And obviously a business has to make money or it doesn't survive, and if a business
Mhm.
doesn't survive, it can't do good. But the idea of doing well by doing good is really, really important to me. And my willingness to be in the private sector now as opposed to academic medicine is because it's a whole new way to do good at a whole new scale. And that's really what Tangelo is about. So they have large contracts with often the government, state governments, programs through state governments, programs directed at the SNAP population, so people getting food assistance, the Medicaid population. So essentially communities that are traditionally underserved, um, and economically challenged often, and providing food as medicine there because essentially there's the increasing recognition that what we're basically doing with disadvantaged populations is surrounding them with junk food and fast food and inviting them to eat badly, and then needing to deal with all the obesity and heart disease and diabetes and all the complications of eating badly. So it's bad for everybody. It's bad for the payers. It's obviously bad for the citizens who are succumbing to all these illnesses. Everybody's losing. If we could turn food into medicine so that we improve the quality of food at the front end, people could derive vitality from their food instead of deriving chronic illness from it. And frankly, the cost savings can be huge because it costs a lot to take care of heart disease and diabetes and dialysis and all of that. So that's why the government is putting lots of money now into food as medicine programs. And that's where Tangelo tends to be, making meal delivery available to populations that traditionally have had very few choices. So I love that. They're also extremely committed to a multicultural approach. We're a multicultural country. You
Mm.
can't give one size fits all solutions here, right? You can't just tell people the DASH diet is good for lowering blood pressure, so just eat the DASH diet. You also can't tell people the Mediterranean diet's terrific, so just eat that. I mean, what if you're from Japan? What if you're from Mexico? It's not a familiar kind of diet. It's not familiar kind of food. It's not what you want to eat. So then the question becomes, can you optimize a Mexican American diet? Well, yes, we can. Can you optimize a South Asian or a Chinese diet? Well, yes, we can. And so Tangelo's been committed to that all along. And now with Diet ID acquired, our combined capabilities include we can assess your diet in detail right now. We can measure your diet type, your diet quality, your nutrient intake levels, your food group intake levels, and we can do that in 60 seconds. We can help you identify a personalized goal diet based on who you are, what you like, and what your health objectives are. And then we can support you, we can coach you, we can have you meet with dietitians, we can send you digital coaching every day. But in addition, we can go all the way and we can send meals to your front door. We can do produce prescriptions, we can do meal kit delivery, we can do medically tailored meals. So together, we can do everything. We can tell you where you are. We can help you see exactly where you want to go. We can show you the difference between here and there. We can coach you, and we can actually send you the food, and then we can measure the difference. And when we do that, when we measure the difference, it's extremely gratifying. We consistently see highly significant improvements in overall diet quality. We routinely measure weight and BMI. Those come down significantly. And when other
Mm.
biomarkers are measured, so markers of inflammation or cardiovascular risk markers like lipids, markers of glucose and insulin metabolism, those all improve as well. Food
Um,
really is fantastic medicine. And the
mm.
potential economics are really, really impressive because it just costs so much less to help people access good food than to let people eat bad food, succumb to illness they never needed to get, and then pay the costs of all that illness. And as I say, when you do that, everybody loses. So
Right.
working as part of Tangelo, we're in the business of fixing all of that.
That's quite impressive. And when I think about um, low-income neighborhoods and food deserts, bringing the food to the front door is really a big part to them. And most of these communities, because of lack of grocery stores and access to good quality food, some of them really deal with major health challenges. So having access to this is really a huge added benefit, especially when we think about on a public health perspective. That's really a very big part to those communities. Now, how can people find out more about Diet ID, Tangelo, how can they get involved if they're interested in getting involved with this?
Sure. So I have a personal or professional website that's kind of a hub for the different things I do. That's
Mhm.
davidkatzmd.com.
Mhm.
And that just kind of will point you in the directions of all
Okay.
the different stuff I'm working on. For
Okay.
Diet ID, it's dietid.com. And for Tangelo, it's jointangelo.com. So each of these, and I imagine Julie, you'll post these, wherever you're putting the show
Yes.
notes,
Right.
um, and we'd love to have you visit and learn more. And each of those websites offers a contact us link. So if you want more information, whether it's about something that I talked about, something that I work on, or if it's about accessing Diet ID or the services of Tangelo, you can just follow the contact link, and members of the team will get back to you promptly.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Like you mentioned, all the links will be in the show notes as well, for anyone listening to us. On a final note, when it comes to the future of healthcare, public health as a whole, what do you hope to see in the next 5, 10 years? Especially when it comes to food as medicine, how do you envision that people in our community will embrace this and actually leverage knowledge and good food to improve health outcomes? What do you hope to see in the next 5, 10 years?
There's a famous expression, Julia. I can never recall who said it because I'm not sure anybody really knows. The best way to predict the future is to create it. And so,
Mm,
throughout my career, I've often been asked about trends. What do you see around the next bend? And I like to think that rather than just predict things, I'm working on creating the future I want to see. So I don't know what the future
mm,
holds. Nobody knows what the future holds. Nobody has the crystal ball. I know what I want and I'm working on it. I want
mm,
everybody to be able to access high quality food. I want
mm,
everybody to derive the benefit of loving food that loves them back. And I want all of us eating in a way that is consistent with kindness in the way we treat our fellow creatures and better for planetary health. So
mm,
right now at Diet ID and Tangelo, we're working on that too. We have a project called Diem, as in carpe diem, dietary impacts on environmental measures. So we're using our diet map and creating a score for the environmental impact of different dietary patterns. So this year, we'll be launching a new application that will enable people to identify what's the environmental footprint of my current diet, what are different ways that I could eat that are good for my health, and which of those has the lowest environmental footprint because maybe I want to pick that. So that's the future I want to see. I want
mm,
everybody empowered to access high quality food. I want us to all be able to access real food, to fill up on fewer calories, to love food that loves us back.
mm,
And I want us all to have information about how what we eat at the scale of, in this country, 330 million people, but globally, 8 billion hungry Homo sapiens, what that is doing to the planet. I want us all to be empowered to minimize that impact, to optimize our diet quality, not just for our own sake, but for the sake of planetary health. All of that is possible. We have the knowledge, we have the information, we have the technology to democratize access to all of that. And I think the economics of it are terrific. So there's really nothing in the way. So, I think we ought to create that future rather than just predict it. And that's the space I'm in. And I've kind of always tried to do that. When I thought something was important, I could just say, I think this is important. I hope it happens. Or I could say, I think this is important. I'm going to work on it. So we're trying to make this future happen.
I really like that. Create the future you want to see. Thank you so much for making time to connect and just share so much with our audience today. I really, really appreciate it. And to everyone listening, until the next time we will bring another exceptional guest your way, stay safe and eat well. Thank you. Just